If you paid attention to me and Meng's Conquest Let's Play, or if you listened to my podcasts on Fates games, you may remember my initial thoughts on NYX, but as a refresher, I found her entrance to the games pretty random and I didn't like her recruitment conversation that much either. In both games, it already colored my impressions of this character before I even put the effort into reading her supports. Now I do stand by that I think her initial coldness is too ham-fisted, and that her artwork is extremely unfitting for her, but anyways. I actually first started to get intrigued by NYX's supports when I was reading up on Xander's support with her for the Parry video. Then after reading Leo's with her, I got really curious. So to start this video off, let's answer the question, who is NYX? As established in many of her supports, NYX was a child prodigy in dark magic. Her limitless potential, combined with her hubris, led her to become a devil child, with little regard for human life. The power she attained, combined with her youthful immaturity, made her a monster who carelessly murdered innocent people with no regard for consequences. Eventually, her enthusiasm led her to cast a forbidden spell too great for even herself. The damage she caused not only decimated an entire village in one fell swoop, killing hundreds, but it stole their life energy. The consequences of this magic caused NYX to cease physically aging, and after decades of failing to find a cure, she now lives in solitude, hoping to one day atone for her sins, accepting what she has become, yet still hopeful to find a cure. Then she meets Corrin on his quest. NYX has a bunch of cool and interesting support conversations. In fact, I can't think of any that are outright bad. I think this is because many of her supports actually reveal different parts of her past, with other ones revealing different traits she has, and others revealing hidden traits she actively and comedically tries to keep secret. Her dark past and her quest for enlightenment is arguably her most consistent theme in her supports. And it may be good to start there with NYX, but I think it's more important to first establish what this curse means to her. In other words, how come she wants to lift the curse? Eternal youth is something everyone would enjoy greatly, right? This very question is addressed in Keaton's and Odin's supports with her. In Keaton's A support, NYX explains that since her mind's matured, she has no use for a child's body. She can't embrace herself because it would be foolish for her as a grown woman to actually act like what she looks like as a child. Granted, she doesn't go into too much detail with Keaton because he's kinda dumb, so she keeps it simple. She gets into more detail with Odin, after she affirms that the rumors that he's heard of her are true. Trust me, Odin, my past is nothing to envy. To tell you the truth, I actually envy you. I would give literally anything to feel that happiness. Eternal youth is also eternal stagnation. I haven't been passionate about anything in so long. Throughout her years, living with the curse for decades has plagued her with a unique kind of dysphoria. Her punishment, while deserved, has ultimately led her to being disgusted with what she has become. While she has accepted her body, she constantly tries to find a cure, but always fails. Constantly trying to atone for her sins in the hope that she can finally be at peace with herself, but still always fails. Forever trapped in a body that doesn't represent who she really is. The impact on her psyche is hard to measure, but it is so damaging that she's understandably depressed and at some points suicidal. My telling of NYX's story begins with Corrin, which I think is fitting since he is the person she interacts with in either campaign for the first time. In their C support, Corrin tries to help NYX find something that she seems hard-pressed to look for. NYX declines his initial offer and tells him that if he wants to help, that he should just stay out of NYX's problems. Corrin apologizes for prying, but she easily forgives him, understanding that it's just his youth that compels him to try to help others. Confused at her mention of his youth, Corrin tells NYX that he's clearly older than her, but NYX disciplines him and explains that when a lady has a secret to keep, he shouldn't go digging for answers. It's obvious here that Corrin doesn't get it yet, and his boyish curiosity doesn't seem to faze NYX that much, since she understands where he's coming from. Admittedly, NYX comes off a bit bitchy, but she's really just a grumpy old lady that can't find what she's looking for. In their B support, NYX is once again looking for that same thing, and Corrin once again pesters her. She mentions his curiosity again, but Corrin states that he simply can't turn a blind eye to a friend in need. This seems to strike NYX, and she mutters, to be young again. Then, because of his insistence, she finally explains to him that she's looking for something called an artifact mirror, which is rumored to reflect only the truth. Corrin then asks her why she keeps implying that he's younger than her, so she discloses her past to him. She explains that with the mirror, she can see the reflection of herself had she not been cursed. In their A support, NYX instead tries to directly lift her curse by casting a spell on herself, but to no avail. After Corrin asks why she does this, NYX reminds him of the curse, and he asks how the curse even happened in the first place. She says she got carried away and lost control of her magic, and with the curse now afflicted, her status of a prodigy changed into that of a monster, visibly showing no signs of aging. This sight deemed her a monster in the eyes of the people around her, an accusation that she doesn't blame them for. Corrin declares that he has never thought of her that way, because they fight for a similar cause. He then tells her that he will keep trying to find the mirror for her. Corrin's kindness really starts to get to NYX here. Not only is she touched by Corrin's gesture, she's also moved by his charisma. "You are so young, so ambitious, and so fearless. Though I am your elder, who's to say you're not the more mature of us?" With that said, maturity isn't only literal. It also means one's willingness to let go of the past and to graduate towards something else. Her insistence on living on her own and turning down friendship is actually part of how NYX believes she can atone for her sins, but that in itself is a mentality that NYX has had for decades, thus not maturing mentally or emotionally either. Let's segue into Jakob's B support, where a similar discussion happens. In their B support, Jakob finds it bizarre and questions NYX why she enjoys people avoiding her, and NYX says that she finds it convenient for her when she's avoided by them, because she thinks that people's understanding that she's a monster is something that she deserves, and living as someone whom people fear helps her to atone for her sins because it allows her to live with little social interaction in her life. "I refuse to get involved with people, at least no more than in passing. I believe cutting all ties with people will help me. If I don't, I risk waking up the monster inside me once more." But despite NYX's theory, Jakob deems it as an immature move on her part. "You should only cast aside those who won't accept you for who you are. Avoiding everyone only punishes you further." By punishing herself on top of her own curse in the way that she does, she only makes herself more of a monster in the eyes of others. The road she takes will never change her for the greater good, which erodes the point of atoning for one's sins in the first place, and Jakob finds this childish and calls her out on it. Similarly, Corrin makes her question her own maturity because of his positive perception of her makes her feel things she hasn't felt on her journey for atonement. In fact, having NYX's failure to understand the shortcomings of her ways of doing things on her pilgrimage seems to be a consistent flaw for her throughout her supports. Her faulty quest for atonement is confronted by Leo as well. It starts in Leo and NYX's B support. He catches her once again standing in a lake looking at her reflection, just like she did in their C support. "My image of myself, and the way I actually am. The gulf between them never seems to shrink. Indeed, as the years pass, it only widens." This piques Leo's interest in the rumor of NYX's curse, and she says that even if there was a remedy to it, she may need to live in her form anyway, as punishment for her hubris as a child. Leo, while accepting that NYX is justified in imposing her own punishment, seems to disagree on the severity of it, telling her that she shouldn't be so hard on herself. Leo then asks who actually laid the curse on her in the first place, but she wrathfully leaves the scene shortly after. In their A support, NYX approaches Leo and she explains how the curse is her fault, but with Leo, she explains a new little tidbit of her past. "I was crazed at first, desperate to find a way to break the curse's hold over me, but as time went on, I started to wonder if I deserved this form. Honestly, this doesn't even seem like a sufficient punishment for my actions." Leo then proposes that he uses his own magic on her, in order to try to set her guilt aside for a moment and to think and picture the matured adult NYX. He asks her if she would give the present NYX at least a chance of forgiveness. NYX, moved by Leo's approach, gives her much to think about and thanks him for his concern, and briefly hesitates while calling him a good friend. As you may be able to tell at this point, her support conversations with these three potential lovers, Corrin, Jakob, and Leo, and Silas as well, follow a similar structure. NYX initially acts coolly and distant towards them, but each time, when NYX is actually put on the spot where she needs to explain her behavior, the curse, her self-imposed punishment, or her hopeless atonement, she's confronted by dissenting views of those of her junior. Some challenge her to think differently about herself, and some try to help her. These confrontations in her supports are shocking for NYX, because she's lived decades assuming that people would still reject her if she decided to let people back into her life. So she just rejects them first, or encourages them to leave her alone. Here's the thing though, she doesn't want to live alone. Deep down she wants companionship, but most of all, she wants to love and be loved. Her shock is the realization that she doesn't need to be alone anymore. While she has yet to atone for her sins, she doesn't realize that by joining this army, helping her comrades and ending the war, she's actually atoning for her sins. Her loneliness after decades of living like the way she's been has took another sort of toll on her. Like any gal out there, she wants sisterhood. In their C support, Charlotte pities NYX because she thinks that because of the way she looks, it must be difficult to get what she wants since she doesn't act like the child Charlotte thinks she really is, and adds on that she wonders what men think of her. NYX understands the sentiments coming out from Charlotte, saying it's a reasonable thought to have for a girl of Charlotte's age. Charlotte seems to actually know of NYX's condition and simply asks maybe it would be a good idea if she tried changing the way she acted, since it might be easier for her to live with people actually thinking she's a youngster. NYX seems a tad reluctant, but nonetheless is open to the idea. As a quick note, I think this provides an interesting insight on Charlotte herself, since we get a look to see how smart she really is. For NYX though, she doesn't really come off cold or distant, and like her reaction to Corrin's inquisitiveness, she chalks off Charlotte's gravitation towards men as just a thing youngsters do. Her casualness to young folks is something that I will get into later on though. In B, Charlotte is pushing NYX to try acting like a kid again. She tells NYX to think how she acted when she was hungry as a kid. I want to eat sweets. I want to go play outside. Charlotte encourages her to keep going. I'm really happy when we play together. I want to do it all the time. I'm sad that we have to stop. NYX pauses, and then demands that she wants to stop the activity, despite Charlotte thinking that she was on a roll. Regardless, NYX seemed happy at the activity. Her line about sweets is a nice little reference to her and Mozu's A support, but the latter two, especially the last, says a lot about NYX's childhood. Remember, these are the moments of her childhood that she may not have experienced in decades. What it seems to indicate is that NYX had a childhood friend when she was young, but what it really signifies is that she wishes she had one. To prove this, let's defer from Charlotte's support and jump right into NYX's and Orochi's B support. After Orochi established a childish and petty rivalry against her because she felt that those in the camp preferred NYX's magic on the basis that NYX's youthful appearance in combination with her wisdom was more appealing than what Orochi could offer, B begins with Orochi ready to square off with NYX in a diviner off, or mage battle, whatever soothsayers in a fight do against each other. But NYX refuses the challenge because she simply doesn't care about this petty bullshit. Then Orochi begins to taunt her, but NYX snaps back and says that she doesn't need to battle her to know that Orochi is already an excellent diviner at her age. This humbles Orochi, and she apologizes for acting petty and also admits that she can act a little childish at times despite being a grown-up. Then she says she's happy that NYX is using her magic to help others. NYX asks Orochi to leave her alone again, but Orochi calls NYX out and says that that's actually not what she wants to do. Slightly flushed, NYX says the following. I would advise you to stop with teasing. It's beneath you. Perhaps we'll chat again. I'll admit that I feel a sisterhood between us, and that lightens my burden, a little. In A, Orochi approaches her and opens the conversation on the topic of sisterhood. NYX herself admits that she's dwelled on her comment about sisterhood as well, and that she felt her baggage is lighter thanks to Orochi. Because NYX can see a bit of herself in her, it makes NYX happy that she doesn't judge her despite her attitude and appearance. What I'm saying is that I dearly wish I'd met you when I was young. I may not have done many of the things I did. If I'd only had a friend like you then, I would have never... ellipses points. What dwells on NYX throughout Charlotte, and especially Orochi's support, is that she wishes she had a friend like them as a child, because that may have stopped her from going too far. So referring back to her line in B, it really is a sad wish to have had friends growing up. Maybe, just maybe, if she had someone like Charlotte, who understands her plainly, or Orochi, who she can share her magic with, she may have had a chance to live a normal life. In both these friendships, NYX's baggage is lifted because that deep desire for a sisterhood is finally being earned. Her atonement isn't going to be achieved through living alone forever and dwelling on what she's done in the past. It's going to be achieved by appreciating others and being appreciated for what she's doing now. So in the future, she can finally be able to live with herself. And NYX herself may very well not be able to realize that that's the case. It makes for an interesting flaw in her character. She wants to atone for her sins, but her head's so far up her ass from living in such solitude that she doesn't realize that helping other people, whether it be through soothsaying to save Arthur from actually being killed, or helping Mozu learn to read better, or helping Hayato face his fears, she does it because she genuinely wants to help others now. But she never had the chance given her circumstances before the war. She never admit to it, but this old lady just wants friends. It also makes NYX a much more dynamic character. On one hand, we see NYX getting approached by males in the army, and their curiosity and care for NYX forces her to disclose her past. Her partners break her barrier, and they fall in love. These supports have a serious and somewhat tragic tone to them, but nonetheless they end happily. On the other hand, she has supports where she just wants to help younger members of the army because she likes seeing youngsters do well and wants to help them improve themselves. But she tends to mind her distance from people from getting too close, because she expects them to reject her if they knew the truth. Here's 2 examples. When Jakob proposes to her, she stops him and tells him about what she did in the past, because he deserves to know at that point. With Laszlo, after he proposes his feelings, she tells him that he doesn't want her baggage to be placed on his shoulders. In both of these instances, she expects the worst. This puts NYX between a rock and a hard place. She wants to be accepted by others, but she thinks she doesn't deserve it, no matter how close her allies want to accept her. It's so damaging to her psyche that we often see her rejecting offers of friendships or more, no matter how much she actually wants it, because if they knew, they'd leave her. Decades of living in solitude, thinking this was her punishment for life, has become a self-fulfilling prophecy. Fitting for a soothsayer, don't you think? Decades of living alone has shaped NYX into the woman she is to this day. Despite her appearance, she's just a lonely old woman, a human being just like you and I, with fantasies and desires for companionship, romance, and even sex. In her and Kaze's C support, he finds her sitting under a tree reading a book. He tries to greet her and be courteous, but she tells him that if he doesn't want anything, to just leave her alone. Kaze speaks charmingly, asking if there truly is no way she'd open her heart to him, saying it pains him to see her alone. Is there nothing I can say to change your mind? Will you not open your heart to me? I promise you will not regret it. Kaze's best intentions are nonetheless forward and flirtatious, and NYX takes offense to this. She tightens up, telling him to stop talking. What's with those romance novel cliches? Have you no shame? Is this what all young people are like these days? Kaze, interested in NYX's allegation, asks what romance novels even are. But NYX, clearly flustered, states that she doesn't read them either. But clearly she does, as Kaze notes. But NYX denies it once more and storms off in embarrassment. Aside from the C support being pretty funny, it's also very humanizing for NYX. Clearly, reading romance novels is a guilty pleasure. It's a skeleton in the closet, one that would be super embarrassing and could ruin her reputation if it were known to the public, and may invite other members of the army to come talk to her. In B, Kaze, ignorant of the genre still, asks her to tell him more about her collection of romance novels, but NYX denies that they're even hers. She says that she'll never tell him, and mutters that she'd be mortified if people found out what she actually read. And Kaze becomes a bit upset that NYX doesn't want him around, but NYX's knack for helping others gets the best of her again. And she offers Kaze a war book that she actually handpicked herself, in anticipation that Kaze would bother her once more. Kaze then cozies up next to her and starts to read it, to NYX's dismay, swearing to the gods who cursed Kaze upon her. We see 2 things from NYX here. One, that either the books she reads are extremely cheesy romance novels, or even actual adult erotica. I'm serious, just stick with me. And it would be super embarrassing if they found out what she read. And 2, NYX is very considerate to her allies. Like she did with Mozu, she handpicks a book tailored to Kaze. In A, NYX tells Kaze that the reason she reads books all the time is because spells and books are all she has, so she collects them all the time. Kaze comes up with the idea that she should lend her library to the other members of the camp. He offers himself to be the book delivery man, so NYX can maintain her solitude while indirectly helping everyone. Then Kaze says this: "Sometimes when I see you reading here, you look so lonely. I think you secretly do crave the friendship of others." NYX considers the idea, but then Kaze tells her that her romance novels would then be public domain, and hopes that it would be a hit among the women in the camp. Because NYX lives in solitude, she has become a book-reading hobbyist, especially of the romance genre. That in mind, combined with Kaze's speculation that she secretly craves the friendship of others, indicates that NYX dreams that what she reads in these books could be real one day. Since her condition and her punishment restrict her from friendship, romance, and sex, the next best thing she can do is read about them and dream about it. It's kinda sad, honestly. In their S support, Kaze asks to read another book, this time a romance novel. But NYX reminds them that those are off limits, but Kaze begs her, so he can learn to tell NYX that he loves her. Well, turns out he just did, as NYX notes. And Kaze tells her that his love for her is pure, that he can't bear to see her sad and wants her to be happy, to smile and to laugh. NYX ponders for a moment, then accepts his love, admitting his demeanor is like that of a puppy, and tells him to fetch their stories to read together. All in all, not only is the support as a whole fun and charming to read, it's lighthearted and refreshing to see NYX act in such a vulnerable yet defensive way. There's not much else to say here in regards to the support itself, but it is one of the few supports NYX has when she doesn't disclose her past to her partner. This could be a point against NYX, since I understand disclosing her punishment or atonement is something she was compelled to do with Jakob after he proposed, but there's a time and place for everything. NYX explaining her past would be completely out of nowhere and even tone deaf in a comic relief support like this one. Clearly, NYX's self-imposed punishment still looms over this conversation, and there will be a time when NYX will reveal herself to him. It's just understandably not now. NYX is too caught up in having her dreams made a reality with Kaze anyway. Most importantly, however, this support makes NYX much more human. It lets us understand NYX's real feelings and opens up her insecurities. Insecurities that are easy to picture and are relatable, because they're so grounded in reality. People have guilty pleasures, people have embarrassing secrets, and people have romantic and sexual fantasies. And NYX is a lonely old woman. What other kind of human being could you imagine wanting companionship aside from a lonely old person without it? Another somewhat steamy and romantic support NYX ends up having is with Niles. In their C support, she approaches him and tells him that his use of vulgar language around camp and enjoyment of harassing others needs to stop. After Niles asks NYX to give him an example of what she means, NYX says she won't be baited into saying anything, and then asks him to stop this child's play, to which Niles tries to tease her about her own appearance. NYX tells him to bite his tongue and that he understands nothing. Then Niles snaps at NYX, saying he doesn't have time for fools casting judgment on what they don't understand, and that he loves to get a rise out of them. It's his policy. NYX doesn't buy it at all and pities him, and threatens Niles that if he doesn't cut his shit out, she'll take drastic action. In B, NYX's warning doesn't faze Niles at all, which pushes NYX to do her worst. She casts a curse on him, which legitimately censors his language. After Niles tries to talk dirty to her, he realizes that he can't get the words out. She reinforces her no-nonsense attitude to him, repeating that she makes no empty threats, and then amps up the curse to completely mute him. Afterwards, NYX leaves Niles in his current state. Not only does this support start off with a wicked clash between these two characters, NYX ends up being a total badass by not only threatening Niles, but actually following through on her threat. Seeing NYX actually have this sort of parental gaze for the army, combined with the little shits she gives about bratty, disrespectful youngsters like Niles, is a pretty realistic and relatable trait NYX has, because honestly, who has time for entitled little brats? Anyway, moral of the story in their B support, don't fuck with a witch. In their A support, the now humbled Niles apologizes for his misdeeds towards her. After realizing NYX is the same NYX he's heard of in the past, he says that if he'd known from her in the beginning, he'd never have tried to harass her, as it would be against his policy. He then agrees to at least try to take his vulgarity down a notch or two, as NYX requests of him. This support really shines for both characters. NYX continues to end up looking badass, even striking a bit of fear into Niles towards the end, reaffirming her power over him. She also acts as a foil for him, who will now try to stop being vulgar towards his allies. In their S support, NYX denies Niles' engagement proposal, saying that she won't give Niles the happiness he's looking for, because of her damned soul. Niles doesn't seem to care about it though, since he says that he's no better. Niles then brings up that he's been in touch with someone who might have something that could lift her curse. NYX, flustered, opens the door for Niles to continue his proposal. NYX, now with a smile on her face, thanks him for making her happy, and then demands something else from him. Were we to wed, perhaps you could relax that policy of yours? Turns out, NYX wasn't entirely telling Niles to cut his vulgar language out for the army's sake. She was actually jealous when it wasn't being used against her exclusively, and she demands that Niles talk dirty to her as her husband. So, surprise, NYX is into dirty talk. How about that? Who would have guessed? I guess all those cheesy romance novels, or maybe one of those mortifying books she doesn't want Kazi to share, cater to NYX's tastes, if you catch my drift. Overall, the Niles and NYX support is very well and smartly written. It's a fantastic support between both these characters, and in the context of everything I've established so far about NYX's character, this particular support embraces what NYX is all about. A living legend, whose young appearance masks that of a wise old soothsayer, who is at one moment happy to show some youngsters the ropes, yet quick to snap and discipline those who disrespect her. Someone who treats herself like an abomination, but is perhaps one of the most relatable and human characters, with tastes and dreams of her own, in the game. She has one more support that I'd like to go over though. One that is one of the most dark, real, and serious conversations in the game. It's her and Xander's. In their C support, NYX approaches the Crown Prince and asks him if there's anything that troubles him. Xander counters with a question of his own, but NYX tells him that he shouldn't answer a question with another one. So Xander tells her that nothing troubles him, but NYX tells him he's covering up his real feelings. Xander denies it anyway, and claims that he believes soothsaying is a sham and a ruse. NYX, unfazed, simply asks Xander that when he begins to feel the strain too much to bear, to come see her. NYX behaves somewhat uniquely in the sense that she approaches the Crown Prince and warns him to come see her when he's too overwhelmed. Xander's denial of NYX's abilities is an interesting way to handle her, and keep in mind, he does know who she is. It's a mature move on Xander's part because he treats NYX as if she were this old gypsy woman trying to tell fortunes. Xander's mature writing with his age is one of the few where we see an older character interact with NYX, especially after reading over so many conversations where NYX has interacted with much younger members of the army, both in age and in attitude. In their B support, Xander approaches NYX and asks her what she thinks is troubling him. She tells him that he truthfully has no desire to kill his enemies, but in war he needs to fight as if their lives mean nothing. And while he does need to think this way, it hurts him that his undying dedication to Nor is also his weakness, as it forces him to toss his own feelings aside for the greater good, and that he must give his true feelings a voice and be true to himself on occasion. Xander affirms that these are truly his feelings on the subject, and quickly leaves her. Xander is proven wrong here, and he credits her accuracy on soothsaying, but her reading gets to Xander somehow. His brisk exit from the conversation indicates some kind of vulnerability that Xander tries to keep secret. Xander makes an effort to come off as the unrelentingly patriotic Crown Prince, but NYX can break him down into a more human and relatable character, and it's helpful for Xander, since we often see him act otherwise in 3 campaigns. In their A support, NYX comes forward and tells him that it wasn't her soothsaying that led her to read Xander, it was something else. She could do it so accurately in part because she can see herself in him. She begins to explain why she is cursed, delving into the spell she recklessly cast, costing the lives of many. There were times when I wanted to die rather than deal with what happened, but I live on, hoping that someday I might find a way to atone for my crimes. Despite this, I found that my talents lie mostly in dealing more death. It makes one wonder what the point of it all is. If all I do is killing, am I really winning my salvation or something else? Xander, taken aback, tells her that they may be more alike than he once thought. NYX tells him that she'll listen to Xander for as long as he wishes, confident that she'd have advice for him. NYX reveals a new detail in her story, that her actions and the curse was at times too much to bear, that the prospect of cowardly ending her life and ending the pain there was sometimes desirable. But she continues to live, even if her journey for atonement is hopeless, and as much as she would enjoy giving up, she still goes on because her guilt forces her to. It isn't exactly clear what Xander means when he says they are more alike than he thought, but that clears up in their S support. In terms of lives claimed, I am not far behind you on that grim tally. If there is any way for us to atone, it is by stopping the fight here. Together we shall ensure such a burden never touches another generation. You and I will be the cornerstone of a new era of Nor. And that's what Xander was talking about. The burden that NYX reads off of Xander is the guilt he feels of killing his fellow man. Yet to actually atone for the deaths at their hands, they both need to keep killing. Contemplating the irony of this is something that both Xander and NYX have dwelled on countless times. That's the familiarity these characters feel towards one another. Xander's marriage proposal is grounded both on pure love and that his hopefulness that by working together they can combine their wisdom and abilities to finally put an end to it in the best way they can, to keep fighting. This support is dark in tone, while showing that the writers are capable of handling serious topics like suicide. It treads territory that Fire Emblem's seemingly lighthearted slice of life and unserious tone that the franchise has recently adopted has seemed to abandon since its life in the early 2000s. It's a reminder that Fire Emblem can still balance the scale of their cast being lighthearted while at the same time knowing that there's a time and place for serious moments. This support is so impactful that it legitimately parallels Dwessel and Null's support from Sacred Stones, as similar discussions of shameful past actions to how they can redeem themselves once more for the greater good are brought into light. If you still hold on to the convictions that guided you in Grotto, you can start anew. That is what I must do. We may be diminished by our shame, but we are not dead yet, my friend. I think for romances, this is one of the best that Xander has. The fact is, NYX is extremely qualified as a queen. Even though she's killed hundreds of people, it was decades ago, and it has shaped NYX into the wise and righteous woman she's become. On top of being calm, cool, collected, and wise, she's humble, righteous, and kind. She's lived under scrutiny for years, and now fights for Nor's sake. NYX isn't even known personally by people anymore, since it's been decades people have interacted with her. Now with the knowledge and understanding that Xander will guide her to their atonement and happiness alongside him, she will start a life anew as a fully qualified Queen of Nor. There's not much else to say here. It's a great support for both characters as it reveals much about Xander, and allows us to see NYX interacting with someone who she doesn't treat like a kid. Xander in a way is wiser beyond his years too. With that all said, NYX has a ton of characterization going on for her. And as much as it pains me to admit, there are some issues that NYX has in her character and in her writing that holds her back from being truly one of the best characters in Fire Emblem ever. First of all, her artwork is tone deaf. NYX is a wise, reserved, and conservative elderly woman, and she cannot embrace her body and constantly tries to find a cure. But because of this really annoying standardizing rule that requires all members of a certain class to wear certain equipment, like uniforms, NYX is dressed in a skimpy, provocative, and revealing Fate's mage robe. It makes absolutely no sense for NYX to wear something that embraces and accentuates her childish figure. It's an ignorant and stupid design choice, especially considering that Fire Emblem has always made an effort to go the extra mile and design custom animations and models befitting of a character. They did it in the GBA era, and they even give characters unique battle models in Fates. I think it's a disservice to ignore NYX in this way. Second, as I mentioned from the beginning, her hammy recruitment conversation just makes her come off like much more of a sassy brat than she actually is. I'm not sure if the brain trust behind NYX's design and the main campaign writers are the same people, but regardless, it's telling of how tone-deaf Fates can be. Lastly, while none of NYX's supports are outright terrible, the sheer amount of supports that NYX has that revolve around her past can understandably end up looking like a NYX pity party, even though it's in her character to warn her partners about her history. I found a few of these support conversations, like Corrin's, Silas's, Tsubaki's, are all of samey progression and quality. And while Benny is one of my favorite male characters in the game, I couldn't feel the chemistry between these two, and support didn't really help either character develop. It gives a bit more into NYX's past as she mentions that she accepts her body out of complacency, but it's information that could easily be set somewhere else, or just with a more conducive character. Which is pretty much one of the big issues I have with her writing, is that you could probably consolidate 4 or 5 of her supports into one character, and it would send the same message without stretching this character so thin. But that's like the 3DS way of doing support conversations, and it fucks up a lot of characters. And it's one of the reasons why the Fate system and the 3DS system supports as a whole aren't as good. I like how they incorporated Hoshiden mages into her supports, what with Hayato and Orochi, but I can't wrap my head around why they would toss in Tsubaki too. Maybe it was to give NYX access to flying mounts? Other than that, I have no idea. I'd much rather see NYX interact with Azura, Gunter, Fuga, or even Perry. You see, Fire Emblem has always been consistent in delivering well-written supports between older characters in the cast, but Fates doesn't really lend itself well to that possibility, since Reina and Gunter are Corrin sexuals, and Fuga is half of one. Oh yeah, and Effie's support with NYX is completely pointless, and kind of really out of character for NYX. Most of these problems for NYX are somewhat excusable though. As I said, many of her supports are great, and I barely even mentioned Laszlo and Odin's ones, and each of those are great reads too. If I dock points down against Perry for her artwork, I begrudgingly need to do the same thing for NYX. It really is a shame because I honestly, devoutly believe that had NYX been in the FE7 to FE9 cast, where supports were way more tightly written and meaningful, where the franchise didn't rely on heavy pandering, NYX could have been one of, if not the best character in the franchise, at least in my books. In conclusion, NYX, despite her cartoonish cliche, is perhaps one of the most relatable and human characters in the cast. Her journey of living like a normal person is one of pure personal growth and self-improvement, one of the most humane goals one could try to achieve in real life. On the journey, she's fought through depression and had thoughts of suicide, but ultimately stayed resilient on focusing on her goal. And over the decades, she's become deprived of love and compassion because of constant rejection. So set in her ways, after decades of solitude, she tends to assume the worst results, constantly validating her self-fulfilling prophecy. So set in her ways, like a stubborn old hag, she doesn't realize that by joining the army, she ends up being surrounded by people who value her for who she is. She begins to truly atone for her sins by joining the fight, helping her comrades, and letting people into her life. She's very deep and dynamic, woven with hobbies, passions, and desires, which come out through instances of genuine care, clashing perspectives on her own self-image, and vulnerabilities in her defenses. Ironically, this anime cliche and self-ascribed monster ends up becoming one of, if not the most, normal and human characters in the game. And that's my take on NYX, guys. If you liked this video, please leave a like and comment, and share this with your fellow NYX fans. If you agree with this video or disagree or have your own thoughts on NYX, please let me know in the comments. And if you like this series, please subscribe for more. Deuces.